Everybody's talked about the need for more law enforcement, or more resources and all of this, so let's talk about what everybody likes to talk about, taxes. There is an absolute belief, and I'll say as a county commissioner, that the state is abdicating its role in many, many ways in pushing more and more of these services onto the local municipalities and counties, which is only draws from one source, property taxes. The state has a multitude of revenue sources, but yet it is taking these essential services, whether it be law enforcement, EMS, local fire, roads, you name it, it seems to be more and more every day pushed back onto the municipalities. Take that anywhere you'd like to go with it, ladies and gentlemen, but the question we ask is, what would you do to help bring tax relief to the local municipalities while not interrupting services?
All right, so we're talking about taxation, and the fact that a lot of taxation falls on the property owner. Trust me, this is a really painful situation, but yet we have to keep the services alive, and what we have to do, I think, is to look at the state's sources of revenue, and I hate to say this because I'm going to get labeled as that tax and spend Democrat, but we're going to have to keep the property tax at bay, we're going to have to look at other ways that the state can enhance its revenue stream and send that back through to the towns and the counties. And other than that, I'm not sure how that can be accomplished exactly. I wish I did. But I think that that's something that we have to really consider, is revamping our revenue system.
To be honest, taxing is I just pay my taxes, and I hope that it goes to the good services, and I know it's not always going to the right places. So I know property tax also helps fund our schools. So it's hard to decide, right, if you're going to protect people or give them an education. So I think we need to have more economic development in the area that would help to provide more of those tax relief payments and revenues that come in. And I think that we have to be appreciative for the services that we have. So those that don't want to fund the police, that doesn't help us on any of the terms of it. So we need to make sure that the funding that we do have goes to the right places, and hopefully some economic development in the area will help make more revenue come in.
Business development, easier said than done, but we were talking about earlier, someone mentioned if you could just start a business with 15 or 25 employers, that sort of thing. But in rural towns, that's a difficult thing. The big another big problem now is if the town will come around and assess your property. At this point, it's going to be a worse problem. I think I'm not in the legislature yet, but there was a bill passed last year that you can freeze your taxes. So that may curtail it for the short term, but maybe not for the long term. You're right. I think each town will have to assess what they want to offer for services if they're going to decrease taxes. Is there help from the state? I'm not sure. But yeah, big problem. It is a problem, one of many. But if it's just about trying to survive your year by paying your taxes and essential items that you need, yeah, it's just one more struggle. So yeah, we can do something, and I'm looking forward to sort of investigating the potential solutions to that as time goes on.
That is a kind of a tough subject. We was able in the last legislature to fully fund our commitment to our schools at the committed 55%. That on taxation, we worked hard to get that through, and it was something that should have been done a long time ago. I think part of the problem is the state is real handy at giving out unfunded mandates. We can demand that the towns do this and do that and not pay for it. Well, I think that anything that we demand the towns do, that we mandate they do, we should also have a revenue source for it. And if we can't come up with a revenue source, then we can't come up with a mandate. Property taxes are a problem, especially now where, since COVID, real estate values have gone through the roof. So, as people, over the next year or so, as towns reevaluate, people are going to have tough times with just, between the inflation, the added cost on the heat and oil, property taxes, there's going to be a lot of people on fixed incomes that are really going to be struggling to just have enough food on the table to eat. So I think when we go back to Augusta, we need to take a new look at how we do things. And one of them things is that we can't mandate things that we can't pay for.
Just want to follow up on Tim with that bill that went through on the age of 65, with the your taxes would stay stable. I'm not quite convinced with this bill. I think there's a lot of loopholes and bugs in it myself. Like, number one, what happens if somebody has it frozen and they build on an addition? Well, that's going to change things right there. And how long is it? Is it going to take the state to reimburse the towns? And if it takes quite a while, we still have to have that revenue to operate our towns. So I've got a big concern about that. Another thing is, with taxes, we've got way too many non-profits. That hurts the taxpayers. Down in our area, down here, we've lost a lot of land off the tax base. And somehow, if I get in as a legislator, we've got to try to put a handle on this. I mean, they should be paying something. I mean, we're so rich down here with water frontage, and a lot of you probably don't know what the federal government is trying to do down here to Washington County. They're trying to turn it into a historical national park. And in my own opinion, I believe this is all wrapped in together with the lobster fishermen, because they want to put those old windmills out there on the ocean, and I believe it's all tied together. So, and I mean, another thing is, the homestead exemption did increase, and that was quite helpful, but I think they could do a little more. I think the state wastes a lot of money where they could be helping out people a lot more. And we've got to start looking out for our senior citizens. They're having it pretty tough. But it appears we help everybody but our own.
I'm going to echo Tiffany's sentiment. I pay my taxes and hope that my money goes to the right services. I think it starts with people in Augusta. We need to elect people who know how to spend money and don't overspend, know where to spend it and where it needs to go. There are a lot of services that need to be paid for, and sometimes there's not enough money to go around. You also need someone that's willing to fight at the state level to get those kinds of services here, and the money to support them. One idea, maybe, I don't know if it would work or not, maybe increase taxes for people, especially since we have so much coastal property, maybe increase taxes for people that have a second home here, that live out of state and don't live and work in the state. Or maybe give a tax break to those people to create a little more money to help. But I look forward to learning more. It's definitely not my area of expertise, but I've always been told if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I love to learn, and I look forward to hearing everyone's responses and learning more, because I don't pretend to know it all.
I think the nature of this question goes beyond what the district attorney does.
Yeah, you're going to be short-sheeted a couple times here, Bob.
I'll be short-sheeted. So with that in mind, I wouldn't be making laws. I'd be enforcing laws. The legislature hands those down to the district attorney to take care of. One thought that I do have on reducing the tax burden because of the drug problem, addictions, We need more, I think, forceful enforcement of seizure and forfeiture laws, and use those proceeds to fund addiction programs. Now, the folks in the legislature can certainly look at avenues to create legislation that mandates that. It's not used. I'm not a big forfeiture fan, generally across the board. However, I have no mercy on drug traffickers. They're killing our young folks. They're poisoning our communities, and they are the ones creating the problem that requires money to fix the addictions. So why not hammer them on forfeitures? Take their cars, take their houses. That's their choice. They're profiting off of that business. And why should we be paying to clean up the addiction problem?
There are different organizations that do this in high schools across the state. But I believe I've got this right. Every 10 years, high schools need to involve themselves in an intensive review of what they're doing, how their staffing is, whether their programs align properly, how money is used, what the vision is for the school, and all that. I led 3 of those at Lee Academy over my time there, and they were enormously valuable. They were a little pricey to do, and they took a lot of manpower, but they were enormously valuable when you stop and you look at your institution carefully, honestly, and you see where the weaknesses are, where the strengths are, where the tendencies are, and you make adjustments. I know there's a function of that in state government, a committee or something that does that. I often wonder, though, how active that function is and how effective it is in looking at the ways we spend money and are they spent efficiently. So, I mean, I've owned 3 small businesses over the years as well as being an educator, and I know that being careful with money is a crucial part of making anything function. So that's something that I'm mindful of, that I think can really benefit property taxes indirectly by looking at all taxes carefully. The second thing is I'm mindful of the thing that Warren Buffett apparently said one time about believing that he probably ought to pay his tax rate higher than that of his secretary. Now, he made that observation, but he obviously doesn't really care about that. The wealthy lobby continuously for laws to maintain tax structures as they are. But I don't know at the state level if taxes are fairly, income taxes are fairly assessed. And that's something I'd like to find out. And my hunch is, given the political climate of the last 30 years around taxation, that the wealthy pay far less than they ought to. And those of us who are working people pay far more relative to those folks.
I'm gonna focus on education because, as in probably most communities in our counties, the communities in RSU 24, some of them have about 90% of their municipal taxes go to support the schools. So that's not nothing. And you know, the state has said on numerous occasions that the funding formula they use to distribute subsidy is the fairest one that's ever been in the state of Maine, which I think just speaks incredibly to how poor the previous ones are. You know, the state uses valuation, which is informed by real estate prices, to determine communities' ability to pay for schools. And as anybody who's looked at the real estate market recently knows, that valuation, especially in coastal areas, is going up tremendously following the real estate transaction prices. And I know it's been talked about time and time again, but I think it's time for a good hard look at using state valuation as a measure of a town's ability to pay for education, because it's just indefensible to me that we're saying these prices that are rising out of our control are a measure of a community's ability to tax its residents and their ability to earn money and bring money in to support those taxes. So that, I think, is one area that definitely needs to be looked at the state level. Taxes in general, if the pie doesn't change and you're just redistributing, there's always going to be winners and losers. And to me, it's about making it as fair. If we adjust something, that make it a fair adjustment that represents positive impact and minimizing the harm. So for our areas, we definitely need to look at those adjustments.
I'm glad to get an opportunity to talk about property taxes because, as I said in the legislature, this property tax is my least favorite tax. I sponsored a bill in the legislature that would have made the homestead exemption $50,000. That bill was defeated in the legislature. But what I said to the taxation committee at the time was that if there was a hierarchy of bad taxes, the property tax would be at the top. It is the most unfair and my least favorite tax, because is there a tax more cruel than forcing someone who can't afford it out of their home, force elderly people out of their homes? Property is the essential component in our liberty, the ability to own property. And do you really own your home and your property if the government can force you out of it for non-payment to a tax bill that you don't even know what it is until somebody else has spent the money and then comes after you for the money? So that's why I proposed increasing the homestead exemption to $50,000. If I had a magic wand, I'd make it much higher. I think that it should be whatever the level of a modest home is, and then, pay any level above that, or a second home should bear that burden. But a person's actual home, there should be the ability of a person to be left alone in their property without being forced out of it, without having to participate in society if they don't want to, because that is the most unfair tax that there is. Also, I believe that the state is not paying its fair share of revenue sharing. As Mickey mentioned, the state levels out a lot of unfunded mandates. They expect the towns to provide clerks that collect all their taxes for them and then pay a little tiny bit of it back to the town. The town is doing all the work of collecting sales tax, excise tax, all these bills for the state, and then a small little pittance comes back to the municipality. That system needs to be adjusted. So those are the two big issues, and the property tax is one that really gets me.
The property tax is an old tax. At the time when this was set up, the only way to measure wealth was with property. But it has stayed with us. And that has changed, where there was the addition of income tax, which was more a sense of property. Property tax is still a part of our taxation list. I will say I had a conversation with the city manager in Calais, who actually is decreasing property tax because they got back the 5% revenue sharing that occurred. And also have had some other monies come in with grants that they've been able to put together to save the taxpayers' money. This is the first time in a long time there's actually been a decrease in property tax. There are some things that are happening that are helping, but the property tax is still a regressive tax. But towns still have the responsibility. The city of Calais has the responsibility for the water and sewer in all of the people who live within that town and the businesses. Also has the responsibility for ambulance, fire, and police. That also is a service that is paid for by the property tax. Actually, some of the property tax helps the county in their services, police services and other services that the county does. We can't do without those services. So how do we readjust this? I'm not sure, quite honestly. We have three areas we do this in: sales tax, property tax, and income tax. And there is adjustments going both ways. And I wish I had a grand solution to do that, because quite honestly, if you pinch revenue someplace else, it's going to pop out. It's like squeezing a balloon. We've got to look at the whole system and find a way that's equitable, that works well for everybody who lives in the state. And that may be looking at all of the taxes and how they should balance with each other to make sure that we're providing the programs that we need.
You do know where we are right now, where we're sitting having this conversation. We're in the other state of Maine. So I've been a firm believer for years in a flat tax. We can put a man on the moon, but we can't figure out taxes. There's something wrong with that. If it was consumer-based and you have a family that is on the lower income scale, that they spend maybe $25,000 a year. So, what if they paid a 5% tax? You've got another family that spends $250,000 a year. They pay a 5% tax. You've got another company that they sell airplane parts or whatever. They spend $25 million a year. They pay 5%. You know, and it would trickle down back in, and if we could institute a flat tax, you could probably do away with property tax. That's my thoughts on it.
Thank you. I can see where you guys are talking about being the last one and all that goes with that. It's kind of hard to do that. Tax relief is very, very important. And we all know that we do have to provide those services, and they do cost money. I know in the 4 years that I've been actually in the Senate, I've fought to get that revenue sharing up to the 5%. That was by a statute in the law to do that. And we have heard from our towns thanking us and saying, thank you, finally, we're actually getting some relief. Is it enough? No, it's not. But at least it's a start. That, and then funding the schools, getting that up to the 55%. That was something else that we all fought for. The homestead, while we would have liked the 50,000, we settled for the 25,000 as a start, and then increasing it gradually. Subsidizing the taxes, that LD 290 is the bill on it. It has a lot of holes in it. There's some things that we need to work on to fix that. Those are really important. But one of the things I think that we haven't talked about, we talked a little bit about it, is the amount of land that is being taken off the tax rolls that is being placed into conservation land. I think the numbers are showing 30% of Washington County has land that is in conservation land. That's not taxable. So I know at one point in time, I actually had submitted a bill that was suggesting that when they had a piece of land that was going to be taken off, that 50% of the value would have to be, that taxes would have to go back to the municipality, so it did not take them off the record. There was a group that was set up at that time, led by Judy East and the Council of Washington County Council of Governments. It was going to gather the data to identify what did we actually have, what was the amount, and what land did we have. So I think that's something that we need to step back. Pandemic didn't help, because I think a lot of stuff was stopped and they quit looking at it, and Judy took another job and went on. So I think that is something that I do want to take a look at again and bring that up in an effort to try to get some tax relief for our municipalities.
There's a concept I want to throw in. And this is over, this began talking about cost shifting and unfunded mandates, et cetera, out of a variety of programs. And one of the things I often hear about in discussions about taxation is this notion that we just have to save money on taxes because they're royal pain. And they are. The question of saving money, though, is that we have to pay for those services. And they need to be the services that work. And this is the concept I want to throw out, is simply that it's not enough just to talk about saving money. It's we instead need to talk about value and getting the value for our money. we do need to spend money. There are programs that are absolutely needed. And if all that one does is attack spending the money, that misses the mark. The mark is getting what we pay for.
Thank you. There are many things being talked about around the lobster industry right now that are seen as very detrimental to an industry that has been a backbone for our coastal communities for many years. So the question being is, what is your stance on the lobster industry's issues, and what would you do to either enforce and or address those issues, starting at the end?